This video was originally recorded May 2018 at Tibet House, New York. Join Bob, Sharon, and Mark in 2019 as they return in September. To learn more, visit tibethouse.us.
Okay. Welcome back. Okay, through the miracle of mindfulness, I remembered something I was supposed to announce. And this is really a miracle. I actually remembered one of two things. I don't remember the second one at the moment, but it may come before the end. So the one of the two was that the person who does a lot of the social media and stuff for Tibet House wanted me to mention that the older tapes of the three of us together teaching here, and there are many, should all be available on Tibet House US. So if you just go to the web and look for them. So that was really nice. And I can't remember the second one, but it's the same person. So he's watching, so I'm sure he will let somebody know. And well, did you know it stopped at 8:20 yesterday? Yeah. Somebody wrote that. Is it? Oh, you don't know because you were here. Was anybody watching on the live stream last night? Did she say it stopped at 8:20? Like all the people who complained to me?
No, we watched it until Bob was done.
Oh, so maybe it was just this person. An hour of today's thing, or? Okay, so this is Lily, who's in charge of me. And why don't you just say it yourself, because I don't know exactly what.
You guys know that Sharon has her own podcast? Yes, no? Okay. Well, somebody back there. Just okay, good. Yeah, we're going to put up maybe an hour of a mixture of some of today and some of last night from this weekend that'll go up on Sharon's podcast called The Metta Hour. And if you don't know it, for whoever that was over there, a couple times a month there are episodes that come out and Sharon interviews people, or it's recordings from her teachings. It's kind of an excellent resource. So check it out if you haven't, and it's totally free. And you have something to do on the subway now. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I am the intro voice, for better or worse. So, you caught me.
And actually, Bob has a podcast. Is that also on the Ram Dass Network, or is his own?
I think it's his
distribution?
own. Yeah.
Bob Thurman Podcast, I think, is the website. And I was on his podcast not all that long ago. So I know I think he, it's kind of off and on in terms of when he does it, but it's back on. So all kinds of things. And Mark has his most recent book. All kinds of things are happening. All right, so I don't know where they are. But I know where they were going for lunch, but that's all right. So why don't we sit together? I think that would be rather nice. Unless you're really, really sleepy from lunch, but okay. So the operative word, or one of the great principles of meditation practice, is balance. And that figures even in, some of those larger questions of life we talked about before, like how does it feel to have a balance between compassion for yourself and we're just about to sit, and compassion for others, right? So it comes on every level of this process, of this exploration. It comes on the immediate level in meditation practice because we're trying to balance certain energies. We're trying to balance certain forces. Like on the one side, it's calm and tranquility and peace and relaxation. And on the other side, it's energy and alertness and interest and connection. We want both, right? If we were only cultivating the calm, we would ultimately be asleep. And if we were only cultivating the energy, ultimately we would be agitated. In fact, I don't know that much about Tibetan medicine, and Bob is about to walk in, but there's, in some ways you would look at anxiety and say, oh, that's a condition of too much energy, not enough calm. It wouldn't be like a lot of anything pejorative about it, but that's what it is. So that's how you address it. Okay, so it said right away, we're just about to sit, so we're just about to meditate, just in time. So it said that some balance is in our posture, even as you sit there. You want to have some energy in your body. It means your back's straight, but you don't want too much energy, right? And be stiff and uptight. You also just want to be relaxed and at ease. But not like so at ease that you're way slumped over. So you feel your way into what feels like a balanced posture for you. And you can close your eyes or not, however you feel most comfortable, whatever you're used to. If you do get really sleepy, you can open your eyes and continue on. We'll start just by listening to sound again, whether it's the sounds of my voice or other sounds. And let the sounds wash through you. Of course, we like certain sounds and we don't like others. But you don't have to chase after them to hold on or push away. Just let it come, let it go. Bring your attention to the feeling of your body sitting, whatever sensations you discover. Bring your attention to your hands. See if you can make the shift from the more conceptual level, like go fingers, to the world of direct sensation. Just picking up pulsing, throbbing, pressure, whatever it might be. You don't have to name these things, but feel them. And bring your attention to the feeling of your breath. Just the normal, natural breath. You don't have to try to make the breath deeper or different, just as it's appearing. See if you can notice where it's clearest for you. Maybe that's the nostrils or the chest or the abdomen. Find that place. Bring your attention there and just rest. See if you can feel one breath. The operative word really is rest. my early practice, when I'd get too apprehensive about it, I'd remind myself, you're breathing anyway. All you need to do is feel it. It's already happening. Settle back. Let the breath come to you. And if you like, you can use a quiet mental notation of in, out, or rising, falling to help support the awareness of the breath, but very quiet. So your attention is really going to feeling the breath, one breath at a time. If sounds or images or sensations or emotions should arise, but they're not very strong, if you can still be connected to the feeling of the breath, just let them flow on by. You're breathing. It's just one breath. If something is very strong and it picks you up and whirls you away, you get lost in thought or spun out in a fantasy, or you fall asleep, truly don't worry about it. We say the most important moment is the next moment after you've been gone. Can you practice letting go gently? Can you practice beginning again with a full heart in kindness towards yourself, letting go and beginning again? And if you have to do that really countless times in the next few minutes, it's totally fine. Okay, so I want to say a little bit more about the self and some more about balance as we continue on. I also thought of something this morning, listening, about another way of sort of holding, different ways we hold the sense of who we are, or sense of self. So, by popular demand, I'm bringing back this story about this time when it came out over lunch. I was riding in a car with a friend, and we got stuck in this terrible, hideous traffic, and we're complaining very bitterly about it all the while. And then my friend said, you know, we're the traffic too, you know? And I thought, oh, that's very interesting, you know, like, and I realized that that's the place of privilege, right? Like, these are my roads, and you're in my way. You know, they belong to me, and so the rightful driver to set the pace is me, or us, you know, and then you're a big hazard, you know, move it. But what if that sort of centrality, that sense of centrality drops away, and it's we? We're all in this road, we're all the traffic, we're all trying to cope. Maybe we need to seek a common solution to the traffic flow in this town or something, right? And that's just an interesting moment when the bottom drops out and that sense of being central while everyone else is marginalized drops away. And it becomes we rather than such a rigid or calcified sense of self and other and us and them. And of course, as we said, individual existence is here, right? It's not like we become a soup, you know? And it's not that you lose all boundaries, but there is also a we reality that is a little bit like looking at that tree and seeing the network of which it is really made, to see that we are part of this whole rather than only, you know, choosing a college or whatever it is on our own. And so that's an interesting reflection, and the kinds of consequences of not just having that sense of centrality, but being attached to it. You know, they're very strong. It's like I often talk about, you know, when that whole terror, I just had a really good time in France. This is really not a knock on France, what I'm about to say, but when that whole series of events, terrible events happened in Japan, ending up with Fukushima and the nuclear incident. So I was home in Massachusetts reading a whole bunch of foreign newspapers online at the time, and I remember reading this French headline which said something like, radioactive material is flowing across the Pacific due to fortuitous winds. And I thought, well, maybe they're fortuitous if you live in France, but it's not that nice if you live in Seattle, is it? You know? And besides, don't we still believe the Earth is round and like stuff can go around the other side? But we kind of don't in a way, right? We all have a different sense of where the wall is or the boundary, or what's going to keep it over there, rather than come here. But what is the reality? The Earth is round, and things kind of do keep coming around. Or I think it was even the same time, same time period. It was not Hurricane Sandy. It was the one before, I think, Hurricane Irene. I was also in Massachusetts and reading a lot of New York City newspapers then. And so first I was reading the alarm, like it's coming, it's going to be immense, it's catastrophic, you know. And then I guess when it hit, it didn't really affect New York City all that much. So then I was reading all this stuff about, it was all media hype, as though they were not the media, right, themselves, that had hyped it. But it's all media hype, didn't really do anything. And then I thought, well, not if you're in Vermont, which is drowning. You know, but we just have these senses of this is the tribe, or this is we, this is mine, it's over there. And the greatest difficulty with that mindset is that it doesn't reflect reality, which I used the other night as Bob's favorite word, reality. What's realistic? Because once we are at sort of a funny, distorted angle to the truth, we're always going to struggle. How could we not, right? Because we're not aligned with the truth of how things are. It's like the proverbial banging your head against the wall. So it's really, there are many ways in which we look at self and other and us and them, almost like keeping the integrity of that, but loosening the grip of the kind of over-identification with that. And so here we are, taking a look. And from the meditative point of view, that investigation, that exploration, is most easily done from a state of a certain kind of balance. Because if we get sort of overwrought every time we see something come up in our minds and judgmental, and especially if we cling to it like, I'm such an angry person and I always will be, or we go into a spiral of tremendous aversion. I can't believe I'm thinking this. No one else is thinking at all. They're sitting here in bliss. I'm thinking, I'm so terrible. I'm so bad. We don't have the right relationship to look more deeply into what our experience is. The way mindfulness leads to insight or understanding, which is one of our words, understanding, is through having a kind of balance. Now, I never really liked the word balance. I always felt it could imply mediocrity or something really cold or aloof or uncaring or sort of boring. And but really, it's a very dynamic state. It's not meant to imply something inert. It's a state that has some spaciousness to it, a tremendous amount of willingness to look, right? So there's a kind of energy, a sort of audacity. Are you okay? A sort of audacity to think differently or look differently, not just to be bound to habits of old. There's a lot happening in that balance. What's not happening is like a fixed need or a sense of expectation. I've got to see this and only this. Or we all know what it's like, even as an example, to be at work and to go into a meeting and somebody there has this really rigid, fixed idea of a resolution to some problem or dilemma. And maybe 50, I have to look at you, you're having the best time. Maybe 50 other solutions are being proposed, and they're just not even hearing it. It's like, and maybe some of them are even maybe better, but they're not hearing it. Because it's got to be just the one thing, right? And how much do we walk around like that? Or do we have a kind of motivation that is contouring how we're looking? I feel like I've been in many meetings now with scientists, researchers, and neuroscientists presenting their findings on meditation practice and the brain. And there's a process that I've found intriguing where the presenting scientists will do the presentation, and then they'll kind of take a breath, and then everyone else in the room will like jump on them. Like, well, maybe that wasn't caused by that. Maybe that was caused by that. Maybe, how do you know that? Or maybe Matthew Ricard was wiggling his eyebrows, they said once, and that was producing the change in the brainwave and not a change in the brainwave from meditation. How do you know? And it's been so interesting. And I said to one of my friends, I said, in a way, you really have to trust the motive of everyone in the room, that people are seeking the truth. They're being that honest and that probing, because everyone wants to know the truth of how things are. That's what science is. And I said, but you really have to not be thinking, I wonder if they want my grant, my grant money, and that's why they're doing this. And then that question's coming from that weird place, But sometimes we're coming from a weird place. And we can look at our own motivation and check that. Where are we coming from? What do we really want to see? in a conversation, in an encounter? Do we want to be seen as right, or do we want a resolution? Do we want to bring up everybody as much as we can? Do we want to crush somebody because it's a dog-eat-dog world? You know, like, where are we coming from? There's a big difference, and we can feel it when we pay attention between a more narrow, confined, tunnel vision, sort of holding, it's got to be just this one way, and an interest and an openness. It doesn't mean you have no convictions or no values or no principles or no ideas of your own, but there can also be openness, right, which is more reflective of life as it needs to be. Because when was the last time we were really successful while we were holding on to a fixed idea that was defying anything like change? You know, it's not really a success strategy to defy change and try to pretend it doesn't happen. So we have that option of looking at balance and really saying, well, what is it? And what I've come to see is that it's not as I had feared, you know, this really boring, kind of dull, repressed state of not being able to feel anything. But it is a really different way of being with what's going on, so that the maybe more normal habitual limitations, and they are limitations, that give us tunnel vision or give us, keep us bound to habitual reactions, they don't have to be so operative, even if they're coming up. You know, we can kind of see them for what they are. So this is really our opportunity. You know, it's like when that friend of mine said, well, we're the traffic too. It's like all of a sudden perspective shifted. You know, and it's like, oh yeah, look, there's another whole way of looking. Or what happens when we take that moment, as we did earlier today, to reflect on how many people contributed to the fact that we're sitting here right now. Or we make the effort to look at the tree and think about everything feeding it, you know, which is a sense. It's like a mood almost, you know. It's not like you're going to do a soil analysis, you know, and try to pinpoint exactly what, because it's a lot. But it's that knowing that we live in connection and truth to one another. That's how things are. That it is an interdependent universe, and that the heart's response to that, which is what we discover, the heart's response to that is the generation of qualities like love and compassion, which are a great relief, to go back to that, and have to have understanding in them. One of the things people often say about a word like love is that it's so saccharine, it's so over-sentimentalized. Or one person once told me they completely detested loving-kindness meditation because, as they put it, it reminds me of a continually forced Valentine's Day. Like, on the count of 3, you'll be filled with love. And so it's really not like that at all. I also go back to this kind of pithy statement from the Buddha when he said, I teach one thing and one thing only, that is suffering and the end of suffering. I teach one thing and one thing only, that is suffering and the end of suffering. There's one kind of witty friend of mine said once, suffering and the end of suffering are two things, not just one thing.
I thought you said that.
No, someone else said that. But Mark quoted me, and we once did a whole workshop, which you can catch at Tibet House US.
I thought you said that.
No. It wasn't me, but I'll take it.
Two things, Sharon said.
It's two things. Not one thing, but sometimes it is one thing. What is that about?
Yeah.
We did a whole workshop on that, so check it out, Tibet House US. And because that's the you could say that's the grid, that's the valence that we're looking at. It's not good and bad, and you're like, a good person or not a good person. It's not like that. It's about suffering and the end of suffering. And that also links to the fact that our own suffering leads us to cause suffering. That therefore our own happiness, freedom, joy, release is not a selfish thing. It's not like just being self-satisfied, going home and lying on the couch and think I'm really good, It's not like that. But our every interaction, our every effort, our every moment really is an expression of that question: do we have a sense of inner resource and worth or not? And if not, there are consequences to that.
I think if you translate it instead of "and," if you're suffering along with its end, I think there's a way of
suffering along with its end.
Then it seems
I
more
teach
like
one thing and one thing only.
Suffering
along with its end. Oh, we just solved a very age-old dilemma.
Okay. Making the "and" a big thing. Then they get that.
Suffering along with its end. Okay. That's good. So just think about that for a moment. Doesn't that feel better?
The more of the end does always feels better.
I forgot where I was going to say that. So that implies, we were talking also this morning about traumas and things that come up when you say to a retreat. I can't wait till the marketing department at IMS sees that. These horrible encounters. Stuff. The possibility does exist right there to relate differently, which is the whole point. When I said this morning, what then? We admit the sometimes really grievous truth of what happened, and then what? Do we go on in a different way? Do we not? Do we hold what happened or happens in isolation, or do we forge a sense of community from it? Do we have compassion for ourselves and ultimately for others from it, or not? That's the moment of our possibility in our practice. But it's also not a mandate. And this is something that I think is really important in this day and age. It's not a mandate in the sense that we can easily fall back into good and bad and right and wrong depending on that relationship. But really, it's not that way. It's like it reminds me of my most recent book. It was called Real Love. And I was quite late in turning in that book, really late, like 2 years late. But I was one day early from my final deadline was August 1st a few years ago, and I turned it in July 31st. So happy. And I turned it in, and I got an away message from the publisher. And I thought, oh, great, I could have had 3 more weeks. But it didn't happen that way. So I waited and waited and waited and waited for something, to come back about the book. And he finally wrote to me, and he said, I really like the book. The part I liked the most was when you quoted Roshi Joan Halifax, when she said something like, don't try to force yourself to think of the traumas of your life as a gift. Think of them as givens. And don't
Think
try
of
to
them as a given.
think of them as a given, not as a gift. Don't try to force yourself to think of them as a gift. Think of them as a given, like this happened. Because if you try to force yourself to think of them as a gift, then you're not liking the way you really feel, and you're kind of pushing in a false way or phony way. It's like pressure to, have it appear like that you're grateful. Maybe you're not that grateful today, but it's a given. So what are you going to do with it, So rather than assume this persona of this kind of perfect, very sweet relationship, recognize, okay, this happened. Now what's possible, right? So my first reaction upon reading it was, I also really, really appreciated the quote. And then I thought, oh, his favorite part of my new book I didn't even write. Someone else wrote that. But it's kind of my favorite part of the book, too. So. So that's the other side of it. It's like there's a tremendous possibility and an invitation, and it's not like a measure of your worth, as to how you meet it, or it's not like a demand or an expectation, which means it's really up to us, and honoring that sense of possibility, as much as we can. Okay, so do you want to say something about anxiety and depression before we go on? Because somebody asked me.
I want to say something about facing the ego.
Okay.
About what I learned from Bob. So maybe I can get you to talk about the feeling of injured innocence.
Of injury?
Of
injured innocence.
innocence.
Injured innocence.
Oh, injured innocence.
Injured
Oh, good.
innocence.
Oh, yes.
Because the main thing one very important thing I've learned from doing this stuff with these guys is to understand the Buddhist notion of emptiness or egolessness or selflessness. You first have to find the self as it actually appears to you in your own real experience. So you can't just leapfrog over who you think you are in order to find the greater reality, whatever that might be. And so there are certain ways entrenched in the Buddhist psychology of zeroing in on the self that the Buddha asserted doesn't exist. Because in order to understand what he meant by the self that doesn't exist, you have to find the self that you think does exist. And that's not as easy as it sounds. But there's a couple of tricks. One that I learned long ago from Bob that I think he could describe maybe in one particular way, if he will. Will you?
What's that?
Would you talk?
I'm sorry?
Will you
talk about injured innocence?
Oh, injured innocence.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess you want me to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, well, then we should do that with in the context of meditating. Okay. So go into meditative mode then. The easiest way to do that. And this is something known as the 4 keys of meditating on selflessness, which of course is a really key and important meditation for all types of. I'm sorry, I was looking for a battery for my hearing aid. Never mind.
Oh. Do you need
all kinds of meditation.
Do you need it in your bag?
I know one. I have batteries, but never mind. Don't worry. So it's a weird battery for a weird type of hearing aid. Don't worry. So go into meditative mode, and in meditative mode, they said this thing called the 4 keys of meditation on emptiness.
The 4
and,
keys?
Yeah, selflessness, emptiness, same thing.
Keys.
Same thing. Keys. Right? So the first key is called the identification of what is negated by the word selflessness. The lessness makes it a negation. And so what is it? In order to understand a negation, like this room is lacking of an elephant. So you have to know what an elephant is, right? So in order to understand selflessness, and that's what wisdom is the understanding of selflessness, you have to know what self is being negated. And so the first key is to identify that which is being negated. Okay? So in your meditation, you try to remember a time when you were innocent of something and someone accused you of it, preferably very vehemently. And even best is when someone you care about said, you did, how could you do such and such? How could you do that? Why did you do that? You did such and such, and you didn't do it. It doesn't work if you did. But if you didn't, then you strongly feel the condition of injured innocence. And in remembering this incident, sort of a little bit like an actor, method actor, you want to inhabit the emotion and the gut feeling that you felt. And this is a feeling that explodes or magnifies itself very quickly, probably, in whatever you can manage to remember, into a feeling of indignation, righteous indignation, and eventually maybe anger if the person doesn't listen to your alibi or your protestations of innocence and keeps accusing unjustly. So this is not to muddy it with those reactions. The very first shot of injured innocence is what you try to remember. And in the process of remembering, you do something that surprises you when you think you're supposed to be thinking about a sort of space and an absence and all this kind of thing that people think about in the negation, like emptiness or selflessness. On the contrary, your memory awareness, you try to make that a smallest part of your concentration or your consciousness. So that it's as if you were a spy or a hidden witness. And the main feature of your consciousness is to recover the feeling of injured innocence in your gut, which you might articulate verbally as like, how could they think I would do that? How could that I would never do that, I don't do that sort of thing, all that sort of thing would arise from this feeling. And so try to remember such an incident and try to feel the frustration and the indignation, but not the reaction, just the feeling of hurt. And where it hurts, that they would think and that they would wrongly accuse you, he, she, or they. As I hope you can see, as you bear down on inhabiting such a moment in your past, remembering in the form of reliving. It's like a kind of sickly feeling in the pit of your stomach, sort of rising toward a kind of tightness in the diaphragm, in the chest, up at the base of your rib cage. And it's like this sense of I, ego, as a pronoun, seems to come from. Unquestioningly, I would never, I am not like that. Not me, no, I'm not like that, no. Of course, those are all reactions that come from this feeling of fixed rootedness in the sort of gut, heart area. They say that to achieve the wisdom, the intuitive understanding of selflessness, you should pursue this rooted I-ness until you sort of admit to yourself that you don't agree with the Buddha or anybody who says selfless. And you then recognize from someone who does say that kind of thing, since if you think about it, they are experienced teachers, that they're fully aware that such a teaching is a challenge, and they don't expect a simplistic agreement from you. Since you feel and you felt in those situations, unquestionably, undeniably, I am innocent. I am not like that. I wouldn't. I not only did, I wouldn't do such a thing. It's not in my identity. Then, maybe unusually, you really kind of get it right away. Or many of you have practiced it in the past, and maybe this a little bit, you know what you can feel, what is being referred to here. And then you can move to the second key. And the second key is, well, I don't feel I'm selfless, if that's what is meant. Because I am like this and not like that. I definitely feel. I feel I really am like this. I'm a good person, not like that kind of person. But maybe Buddha, Nagarjuna, such and such teachers, maybe they knew something that I don't. So I will engage in the inquiry. I will accept a challenge. And I will see if where they went wrong in my case, or where I'm going wrong. And I make a commitment ahead of time that I'm going to abide by the outcome. I'm not going to wander off into a state of indeterminate wonderment. Well, I still feel this way, but I'm not sure, but this way, that way. In other words, I will be pragmatic in my conclusion, which is surprising also. But that only has to do with the nature of having an understanding that is negational. You know, if you're looking for an elephant in the room here, because someone says there's no elephant and you want to verify that, you sort of just give up looking at a certain point. You never find the non-elephant. So a negational cognition is sort of open-ended. You know what you expect to find. You know the conditions under which you would find it. They are not satisfied, and then you sort of bag the process of looking at a certain point. You're satisfied. But you never close around a non-elephant. So it's a different thing from a positive cognition, that you know that in your experience. So when you're going to be checking this gut feeling of self with an open-ended inquiry, if you don't find it within certain parameters, you will abide by that acceptance. You will accept that conclusion, which will be counter to your gut feeling. You recognize ahead of time. And then that creates a certain situation. So you make a commitment about that. You set up the experimental parameters for your inner work, inner inquiry. And then you start to take a look inside yourself. And the first thing you do is you look through your material processes. You do what Johnny Kabat-Zinn calls a body scan. And you look in your gut. You sort of look in your brain. You look in your nervous system. You look in your heartbeat and your digestive system. Whatever map you have of your body, you look in it. And is there some sort of a solid thing in there that makes you feel ill when it's disrespected? That you feel that the I arises from, and that the I refers to, and clunk, hits it. So you look for that. And here we have a wonderful gift of the wonderful scientific materialists of the last few centuries, who have gone right into the body and the cells and the molecules and the atoms, and then in the last century especially the subatomic particles and the waves, and then the inconceivable super subtle realm on the boundary of the speed of light, and below the wave particle paradox, and where there's spooky action at a distance, all this kind of, we can meditatively go in there. You don't have to know the math, because there's a matter of like little billiard balls and images, you know, and little explosions, and you can go into that. And if you develop meditative concentration along with your inquiry, which is what vipassana is supposed to do, your vipassana, you'll have a feeling that whatever this self is, it's not a material, at least an ordinary material thing. You definitely will achieve that. So then you say, well, maybe it's a sensation because I feel all congested when someone accused me, and I feel like, no, I feel sickly that it's being stressed like that. So it's a feeling, kind of. So then you look at those feelings, those sensations, and it's kind of painful, but then you notice that they're change. It's not a set feeling. It's not a same feeling always. Now it feels like congestion. Now it feels like a heat, like a kind of rage. Now it feels icy cold. Now it feels, there's no fixed feeling that has your own name on it as a label, could hold your name as a label, or even could hold the syllable I, or the Greek two-syllable ego. So then you think, well, wait a minute, maybe it is my name. It's maybe an image I have of myself, a word or an image or a sound. So then you look into your verbal, imaginative, ideational processes. And I have a word self, and I have a word Bob, and I have a word human, and I have a word I. And I know the pronoun, personal pronoun in many languages. Wo, watakushi, nga, aham, moi, ich. You can go through all of them. And even those things you will disassemble under your investigative vipassana-ish analysis as you turn your mind in. And you, like, for example, my name is Bob, but some people call me Hey You, some people call me Dodo Head, some people call me Thurman, some people call me Bo, some people call me Alexander, etc. Even Bob is a construct. So then maybe it's the emotion. So then you move to sort of the emotions and the deeper structural mental functions. And you say, well, maybe it's kind of a surge of self-assertion or a surge of presence. Maybe it's my feeling of a fixed presence because I'm here, So you look at that. Not articulated, not sensational, not physical, but kind of And then you realize that all of those deeper sense of presence, emotional surges, they're all changeable. None of them have the name Bob on them. They're not fixed identities. So then you come to consciousness process. And of course, that's probably where it is, right? It's that point that marks dead, the controlling, unchanging point of subjectivity that somehow always registers all the different changing things. So you realize that your consciousness is often tied up with what you're seeing, with what you're hearing, with what you're smelling, what you're tasting, what you're touching. So none of those are a fixed you. They're just reacting to the stimuli on the different sensory levels. And then there's a mental consciousness that can imagine things and can align with the visual one, can align with the hearing one, can align with the smelling, tasting, touching one. But then it's when it aligns with them, it's always changing. But still, it seems as if at the root of all of it is an unchanging, observing self, the pure witness. And so then you try to turn back on that subjectivity. And each time you do, you notice that you don't find it. You don't land on it. But then you say, of course I don't, because I'm the one who's looking. So it's like a dog's tail when it's turning around to catch its tail. Tail whips out of its field. So then you decide, well, I'm a yogi, and I'm not going to give up that easy. I'm going to concentrate. And then if you really have that concentration, you will start spinning in your mind. You'll become a whirling dervish trying to catch your subjectivity as an object, that you can confirm its presence. And as you whirl and whirl at the deepest inner layer of your being, they say you become like a diamond drill. And the diamond drill seems to be seeking the diamond drillable, which is that first sense of solid self that you have found during the first key identifying the self. And so you're trying to drill down to where you hit bedrock with the bedrock. And when you do, and when you drill, and then this is where you really need shamatha, stability of meditative awareness. You really need one-pointedness, chittasya ekagrata, one-pointedness of mind, samadhi, to companion with your probing, inquiring vipassana, seeing analytical mind. And when you can withstand that, what will happen, they say, is it will become kind of unbearable. The sort of all stress and all focus and all concentration turned on itself, but never quite finding itself. And then this will kind of reach critical mass, and you will go into what is called, you will go into balance, what Sharon was talking about. And it's called a space-like equipoised concentration. And it will have relief, actually. And you will feel relieved and a feeling of expansion. You'll lose a sense of the subjectivity that's looking. You'll lose a sense of the objectivity that's being looked for. And you will sort of space out. And it will be so powerful that your body you'll have a sense of your body disappearing, your thinking process disappearing, your sensational process disappearing, except for a kind of sense of release and relief. And then it's very critical that, although words will also disappear at that point, but it's very critical that you don't leave intact one sort of feeling of unchanging presence, that this space is the self. Even though, of course, it wasn't contained inside your gut, but yet it feels like so real, and it's such a relief. There is a huge temptation to feel that this vast sense of vastness and expansion and space is that self that you are looking for. But if you have the momentum of vipassana, without words, that critical seeing, which is what the word vipassana means, will immediately evaluate itself in the space, or maybe you'll enjoy the relief for a while first, but eventually we'll evaluate the experience of the spacious balance, and it will kind of go through it, and it will get out of its own way, and it will not be experienced as a place apart from where you were before. Although, when you move from the space-like equipoise, samadhi, when you return to being sitting here in the chair in Tibet house, or wherever you are meditating, wherever you are pursuing that inquiry, the feeling of that spacious thing will balance itself within the field of differentiation, and you will enter what they call the dream-like or the illusion-like aftermath samadhi, so that suddenly things will be experienced in their differences, and yourself will be experienced in its difference in a sort of lighter way. Just as when you see your face in the mirror, you see your face, but you know it's not your face at the same time as you see it, without having to have a second thought about it, because you know underlyingly that it's a reflection in a mirror. So it's both your face and not your face. And that doesn't frighten you or freak you out. In fact, it carries over the relief into what you previously thought of as the unrelieved experience of self versus everything other. So then you can relax even they accuse you. Is that helpful, Mark? Is that helpful?
That was great.
Is it helpful?
So, do you use that in your personal life?
What's that?
Do you use that in your personal life?
Who, me?
Yeah.
I'm still trying. I'm still trying. You shouldn't expect. And I rationalize my failure to be absolutely non-dual at all times by being aware that, you know, we are wrongly led to expect that, you know, satori or non-dual inside, or the realization of emptiness, all these terms people come up with, is like one big poof, you know. And that's a mistake. And all of the teachings of those who did indeed realize these kind of things are that it's like Atisha said, it's like melting butter in a broth. It's like ironing the wrinkles from a wrinkled cloth with a hot stone. They didn't have a steam iron. A hot cloth, hot stone. So it takes, you know, you can have different depths and levels of that experience. And I've had a level of that experience. And then it comes back, and then someone comes and says, you're a total jerk, and like, whatever, you did something. And then I get all upset. Because it's not like an illusion-like thing. I'm thinking I really, and they really, and I'm insecure, and I'm struggling, right? So that's the thing. You don't expect, if you don't expect to right away, the first time you have the experience of a sort of space-like feeling, you have a feeling of relief. If it then it just goes away when you're going back. You know, you're then like the person that I always like at Sharon Salzberg Meditation Center, who meditated and meditated on this retreat, and then he was heard walking off disgusted and disappointed, saying, "It didn't work," because he felt irritated again that he was there versus the universe, and he didn't stay disappeared. And but every little bit helps, baby steps. Enlightenment is a baby step thing, like a Bill Murray. What about Bob? You know that movie?
Are you going to be on that podcast?
What?
Are you going to be on that podcast?
Which one?
They wrote, I saw it on Twitter, your correspondence about your favorite movie. Oh, this movie changed my life. And you wrote, what about, you wrote Bill Murray, and then they wrote back and said, which movie in particular? And you said, what about Bob?
Yeah, what about Bob? It's great. Well, that's Bill Murray is my guru,
Yeah, well, I read that on Twitter.
Groundhog Day, he gradually, in Groundhog Day, he gradually finally became a bodhisattva, and he became a nice person, and then he could go on to the next day, right? But for a long time, he was almost getting there, right? And then he got irritated at the end, and he dumped a bucket on the head of the old lady, or whatever it was that he did, that made him then click back on the same day, So that's both of those films. Bill Murray is like great.
Baby steps.
I never understood the last one, whatever it was. But I don't understand. In terms of what was it, separation, or I don't know, something. Lost in Space. I just didn't get that one, but otherwise he's my guru. And the point is this, if you do get it too, you should suspend. You think that you did, you should suspect yourself. Actually, your vipassana inquiry should continue. If you're sitting there and think, my identity is that I'm identityless, my identity is that I'm enlightened, then you might very well be stuck in the demon ghost cave. And when I translated this sutra,
explain the demon ghost cave.
Well, that's a Zen thing. As a person who has an experience of disappearing. That space-like a thing, which is a relief and a release. You can have a feeling like that, a space. And then you feel, wow, that's it. And a lot of mystics think that, because, we human beings are so sensitive and delicate and vulnerable. And when is the only time in the 24 hours when we're really happy? Come on, face it. When you pass out and go to sleep. Because when you pass out and go to sleep, you're not worrying about your boundaries. Of course, you lock the door and close the light off, and if you're sleeping with a companion, you're sure they won't molest you, and you're like, and you just shut it all down. And if you can't shut it all down, you take an Ambien. So naturally, you assume that enlightenment is going to be I don't have to worry about it all. Some simplistic kind of a collapse place away from here. And so many forms of mysticism in many traditions, not just Buddhism, they think the guy who disappeared is also holy and so great. And they think that's really great, and they want to disappear. But actually, Buddha's analysis as a psychiatrist, poor guy, he was a prince, he could have been a king, then he was a yogi and an ascetic, and then he got enlightened, and then he could have been something worship, and maybe then he had to be a psychiatrist. And he had to listen to all these people, crazy people. And the point is that the problem of the people is that they think that their essential self is something that is separate from everything else. So then relating to everything becomes highly problematic. Why am I bothering with this? So why do they shoot up with heroin and opioid themselves out when they're not distracted by having a job or having money or whatever it is? And they, why do they do that? Because we're very escapist. So naturally we think of salvation as being just get the hell out of here. And then even come up with the concept of God who's not here. No wonder he does such a shit job with the world.
Absentee landlord.
He creates it and then he's not there. And you say, oh, God, I don't want to be fried in the oven or something. And he seems to ignore you. Right? Then they come up with a deist, he made it and then he took a hike. So that's ridiculous. If something is absolute, it can't relate to a relative, therefore it's irrelevant to a relative. So if you have a state of experience that you think is absolute because of whatever your idea of it is, even you absolute nothing, you're having a relative experience because it's a time you didn't have that experience. So there's no such nirvana that's apart from everything else. Nirvana, if it's a real absolute, it's always been here. It wasn't made by anything. And it's indivisible from all of this samsara. That's only reasonable, actually. It's not mystical, it's reasonable. And apparently there's a way of knowing it. And don't say you can't manage that kind of cognitive dissonance, because you ladies put on your face every morning. And you put the eyeliner on the left eye, what looks like your left eye, to fix up the little smidge on the right eye. Maybe some of you spiritual ones don't use makeup, but you used to. Yeah. And then you see a left eye, and you mentally correct like that to the right eye without even thinking. And you touch the right eye, not the left eye. You don't go reach over the left eye. You flip it over like that. So we can deal with a lot of cognitive dissonance. So then imagine you're here, samsara. Somebody says, you suck. And you simultaneously correct it at the minute you hear it, and you, yeah, because I'm nirvana. Even listen to you tell me I suck. So it doesn't upset me. And you can suck on it if you like. Like your favorite story about Buddha, when the guy was like mad and with the manure, and he said, what, do you give someone else the manure? He says, no, I let the cow keep it. So I put it in the field. Something like that, right?
Something like that.
You keep your anger, in other words.
Yeah.
So then you suddenly can enjoy life, because you're not trying to escape any longer. And you feel escaped even being engaged. And then you really become effective. And don't make me tell about the Zoloft commercial.
I'll tell about the farmer and the Buddha if you tell about the Zoloft commercial.
Okay. Well, you want to do farmer and Buddha first, or you want
No,
me
you
to
do Zoloft first.
Well, you know the Zoloft commercial? It proves that you know that this is nirvana. This is the Zoloft commercial. It's the Dharma being taught by some drug manufacturer trying to get you to take Zoloft. Well, the Zoloft commercial, I mean, some of you must have seen it. There's a lady in a kitchen, and it's in a suburban kitchen, and out there you can see a field outside through the little window over the sink. And then there's little yellow flowers in the field, those kind of little yellow flowers. And then she's freaking out in the kitchen. And the baby was there in his high chair, and he's thrown his porridge on the floor, and the dog is on it and making a mess, And she put in a nice peanut spliced GMO, round out, infected waffle in the toaster. And it's smoking because she was distracted by the dog and the kid. And the husband is in there, where's my coffee? He's got his paper. And she's just totally freaked out. And then the pans out the window to the green field, and the little yellow flower blossoms come off the stem, miraculously, and they form the word Zola. All in a few seconds, because it costs $100,000 a second. So then you get the idea she took one. And then it's like, wham, here, baby, okay, forget your porridge. Dog, out the dog door. Husband, make your own coffee. And here I have a new round out infected waffle I'm going to put in the toaster. And I'm so cool today. I can manage everything. Because she took this little nirvana pill. Because you can buy a nirvana pill. It's just called Zoloft. And you got to maybe tell your doctor to give you a prescription. Because it has dangerous side effects that they didn't know about. And you don't read the little type in there as you're feeling like calling your doctor while you're watching the toaster, because you don't read about how this could, like, your liver could fall out and your kidneys could collapse and all this and all that, and call the hospital. Okay, but that point is that that commercial works proves that we all know when we feel bliss, we can do stuff that we can't do when we're freaking out. We all know that. Okay? So that's what Buddha is hoping for. That's the Buddha land, where people know all this mess is nirvana. And even nutcase up there, he's just in nirvana, shouting and screaming about how right it all was. And then he was right. All those white space and the thing was a huge population, bigger than everybody. You know, all the empty white spaces, it wasn't empty white space. It was a bunch of people wearing white sheets. They were all there. I know that's evil. Never mind. That's a bad joke. Okay, tell us about Buddha, please.
Buddha.
Your turn. What did he say to the farmer?
So the Buddha did something that annoyed this farmer, as the story goes.
He asked for a free lunch. That's what annoyed him.
No, it wasn't even that. He was walking on his land.
Oh, just
or something
walking.
like that. And barefoot. Yeah. The farmer came up to him and yelled and screamed and shouted abuse at him, and the Buddha said something like, "Oh, farmer, what happens if you prepare a gift for someone and they refuse to take it out of your hand?" And the farmer said, "Well, then it remains with me." And the Buddha said, "Just so, I'm refusing your gift of yelling and screaming and cursing and reviling. It's going to remain with you." But I like the manure version
very
too.
good.
You know,
That's a little
They'll tell
easier
that.
than the manure one. I had it mixed up with some manure.